one, there is nothing wrong with you.
Well, I mean, that's a big one, right? Because I would have, well, actually, when I met her, that was, I think, the most profound experience of being in her presence. It wasn't so much what she was saying, although she was saying, darling, you're so precious, in her Southern accent. I say this all the time, but I resisted that because not just did my mind disagree with that, but my whole body. I had a visceral reaction. That's not true. I'm not precious. I'm broken. I'm damaged. So the idea to even entertain, what if I'm not broken, was just groundbreaking for me at the time.
What if the key to recovery isn't fixing what's broken, but remembering what was never broken to begin with? On this episode of Beyond the Window, Ventana Clinical Director Sharon Volner sits down with author and recovery expert TJ Woodward to explore 7 radical principles and more. A conversation that cracks open the window to healing, wholeness, and the power of coming home to yourself.
Welcome to Beyond the Window podcast, TJ Woodward. I'm so excited to have you here. You're an author, you're a minister, you're a speaker, you're a counselor. You're so many amazing things. I'm Sharon Volner, your host, and I'm just beyond words. I have so many exciting questions.
Well, Sharon, I have so many exciting questions for you too, so this is going to be really fun. I have always loved being in conversation with you, and the only difference now is we have people that are joining the conversation, which I love.
Watching and listening.
Yeah.
Okay, so your journey took you from addiction treatment into ministry. How did those two paths come to cross?
It's really interesting because I was one of those people who said, I will never work in addiction treatment. I got sober in 1986, so I had, been in recovery for many, many years. And around the age 40, which we could do a whole hour on, but around the age 40, I had just an inner knowing that I wanted to have a life that had more purpose and meaning, honestly, and more contribution. I think Carl Jung says we spend the first 40 years developing a healthy ego and the second 40 dismantling it. Absolutely, except for mine got dismantled like really quickly. Like my whole world fell apart when I said, I want to do spiritual work. I don't know exactly what that means. Went back to school at 40, closed my business. Actually, my business closed very dramatically and lost my house, lost my car, lost my partner, lost my business after saying yes and going to school. And I'm like, okay, something big is coming. So I accidentally started working in the addiction treatment field. I did not think I was going to do it. And I absolutely fell in love. And that was in 2008.
Wow. That's quite a crossing. And what did your recovery teach you that you couldn't learn from textbooks?
Ooh, what did my recovery teach me? I mean, I think all of my recovery has taught me things that I couldn't learn in a textbook. I think the greatest experience of my recovery was actually one of the most painful. And when I was like maybe between a year and 2 years sober, I like to say 18 months because it's roughly somewhere in that year, I was suicidal and had not addressed any of my underlying root causes or any of this, the deep pain and the trauma that I'd gone through. I had just kind of buried it. And I'd been really happy for a year or so in recovery. And it was in that dark moment that I met someone who changed my life. Her name is Mary Helen. And she really took me on this journey of returning to my true nature and actually having the courage to address and start the healing process of the trauma, the disconnection, and the shame that was running my life.
And I just watched that dedication that you made to her. That was so amazing and so profound. And my question around, because she taught you 7 principles.
Yeah.
And I have them on my phone.
That's amazing. And just to be clear about the teaching of 7 principles, when I wrote my first book, I knew I wanted to dedicate it to her, and I dedicated a chapter to her called Everyday Compassion because that's really how I experienced her. And it wasn't like she ever said, here are my 7, principles that I'm teaching you. It was just when I reflected on her and her life and what she had meant to me and the profound change she helped me go through, I really meditated on what were the core 7 things. For some reason, I wanted to do 7. The core 7 things she demonstrated and taught me that were so life-changing.
So can we talk about them?
Let's do that.
Okay. Because I was really taken by them. And just in reading and having my own reflection about it, I'm thinking, and that's the problem, is I'm thinking versus taking it into my heart, is how do you make that transformation? How do you explain it to someone so new in recovery that's trying to outsmart recovery and check the boxes of all the things that one needs to do, go to a meeting and get a sponsor and do this step and do that step and it's up here versus here, and it seems like Mary Helen taught you to go from here.
Absolutely. And I think I would not have been in a place to be ready to receive these 7 principles or practices if it weren't for that, desperation of feeling suicidal and knowing that there was a lot that needed to be healed, but really having, one, no idea how to do that, but also how would I ever find the courage to look at what I'd been running from for so many years, not just in my drinking and using, but also in my first year or so of recovery, through like working the steps perfectly and going to as many. I remember my first sponsor said, I'm going to ask you to take 1 day a week and you're not allowed to go to a meeting. I'm like, what? Because I was going to like 12 meetings a week.
Yeah.
So there was this sense of running from myself, even in recovery.
Not to leave our listeners on a cliffhanger, I do want to go through the 7 principles.
Let's
and then I want
do
to
it.
talk more about conscious recovery and you. Principle 1, there is nothing wrong with you.
Well, that's a big one, right? Because I would have, actually, when I met her, that was, I think, the most profound experience of being in her presence. It wasn't so much what she was saying, although she was saying, darling, you're so precious, in her Southern accent. I say this all the time, but I resisted that because not just did my mind disagree with that, but my whole body. I had a visceral reaction. That's not true. I'm not precious. I'm broken. I'm damaged. So the idea to even entertain, what if I'm not broken, was just groundbreaking for me at the time. And now, of course, I've modified that to say we're actually whole and perfect underneath all of our behavior. We came in the world that way, and that's who and what we are. But this idea, you're not broken, I had to just ask myself, I had to use it as a question. What if I'm not broken? Or what if all of me is not broken? I had to start there.
Wow, that's beautiful. And there is only one of us here.
There's only one of us here. That is a big one because, and we were actually talking about this before that the cameras were rolling, like we see this in our culture so much, like the finger pointing, the blame, the othering, the grouping, the finding a tribe of people who agree with us. And I think that comes from a place of fear, but it also, in some ways, it's in our DNA to see someone as the other, because early in the evolution of the human species, we lived in caves and we needed to have a literal tribe to stay alive. And I think we know now that that gets passed down and becomes literally a part of our genetic imprint. And so there's a part of us that's always going to see the other. Spiritually, to start asking the question, what if there is only one of us here? The guru once was asked, how do I be kind to others? And the guru said, there are no others. And so to be able to actually practice that, I have some practical things I do. And I just had a lot of judgment. And I didn't realize at the time it was my own shame projected outward. And I, through a series of many, many years of healing, came to understand that really I only see in others that which I possess within myself.
Yes.
And to take it a step further, I think they're going to look back 100 years from now and say they were starting to get it when they were saying that they're all part of one organism. Because we say that, and like, does 100% of my being really believe that?
Yeah.
Or do I have to like continually remind myself I'm not separate from someone because of my opinions or the color of my skin or my gender expression or my sexual orientation or all the reasons we use to see someone as different?
Yeah. And this one is my favorite. The only prayer is thank you.
The only prayer is thank you. Well, Meister Eckhart many, many years ago said, the only prayer you ever say is thank you, it will be enough. And so that really is life-changing, because I remember working with Mary Helen, and at the time I had a very traditional idea of what prayer was. Prayer was asking, oh God, please give me the perfect partner, or oh God, please help me to not drink one more day, or oh God, please. So it was very much an external God, and it was very much a me asking. And she said, try saying thank you for everything in your life and see what happens. And I'm like, oh, part of it is thank you for, if someone's in recovery, for example, instead of please keep me sober today, it's thank you for keeping me sober today. That alone right there is, yes, it's a mind shift, but it's much more than that. Living in a state of gratitude. And because she would say, there's nothing to pray for. I'm like, well, what do you mean? There's all kinds of things to pray for. No, it's only being thankful for what you have and what you experience. And the more you're grateful for what you have, the more you will receive to be grateful for. And so it became a very fun experiment.
Yeah, a beautiful reframe, really beautiful reframe. I like that.
Yeah.
God is within you. God is you.
Yeah, so God is within you. So, Mary Helen was born into a wealthy Southern family in the 1920s. So she came from a very traditional idea that God is a man in the sky, and that you needed to be afraid and surrender and ask and pray. And she realized at some point that God was something that was within her. And she was a person very much involved in the 12-step movement. So she found the places in the big book in the 12 and 12 where it said God is within you. And she would just tell everyone, well, it says right there, the only place you're ever going to find God is within you. And for me, I actually, from that time until now, have changed that to God is me. Now, I'm not necessarily even someone who likes to use the G word, only because it's so loaded and it means so much to people, and people have an attachment to it, or they, might really want to hold their own perception of that, and I honor that. I use words more like source, or, Buddha nature, or, our true nature, our essential beingness. But we're all a spark of that divinity. And to understand that more than just an intellectual concept, but to really say, I am part of that divine energy, and you are a part of that divine energy. And, it was back in the day when people were saying, I am God, and it was very controversial. And it's not, I am God and you are not, but we are all part of that source energy, not separate from.
Nice. Nothing outside of you needs to change.
Ooh, that was a big one. Because I'm thinking back to my, 20, I got sober at 20, so I was probably 21 or so when I was working with her. And, the world was a broken place. And the reason that I saw the world as a broken place, I now know, is because I believed I was broken. So there's no other possibility but to see the world as broken. And I don't know if it's just what we do in our 20s. It was certainly my experience. I was like, the world needs to change so I can be okay. You need to not talk to me that way so that I can feel safe. This person shouldn't be in office, and once this person's out of office, then I can be free, right? So it was very much an outside-in existence. And when she said, what if nothing outside of you needed to change in order for you to be free, or in order for you to experience love, or in order for you to experience peace? I was like, I don't know what you are talking about. So in the beginning, it was just an absolute foreign concept. And then I started to be in the curiosity of that. What if the world doesn't need to change in order for me to be free? And over the course of the years, I've come to realize that the only real change that happens in the world is from the inside out. And then we can be actually much more effective with helping change the world. But if I'm trying to change the world so I can be free, darn it, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Everyone is perfect just as they are.
Yeah, she would say to me, because, again, I had a lot of judgment, and I would come to her complaining about someone, or I can't believe they're saying this, or now we would say they're so toxic, or, and so we have all this judgment. And she would say, if you had their life experience, you would be exactly like them. They're the perfect expression of Sharon today. And so really it was a lesson in compassion and understanding and empathy and honoring someone's journey, and realizing that I don't know what's going on with this person, and my judgment really has more to do with me anyway than them anyway. And to start playing with the idea that maybe someone's okay just as they are allowed me to start seeing that for myself, and then a greater ability to see that for them as well.
Yeah. And then the last principle, which is another really phenomenal one: we are not here to get good, but to become real.
Yeah. Well, I felt bad. I felt like I was bad. I felt like I was broken. I felt like I was damaged. So my natural way to want to work with that was to become good, to become perfect. I felt so imperfect that I thought I could look perfect on the outside. And she said, we're really not here to become good or to get better. We're here to become more real. And as I've explored that over the years, authenticity and vulnerability have become the cornerstones of really not only my own personal journey, but my life's work, because it's through that authenticity, that realness, that we actually connect. And we all know, or I believe, that what we all most deeply desire at the core is love and connection.
Yeah.
And so the more authentic I am with you, the more I am authentic I can be with me, the more real I am, the more I'm going to be in relationships that are based in trust and authenticity.
So I heard you say that you have done 12-step work, and then you've done work with the ministry, and then you've been very impacted by Mary Helen and her work, and then you created your own work, Conscious Recovery.
Yeah.
And so how does that differ from 12-step or the medical model when we're talking about addiction? How does that all come together?
Well, I want to start by saying that Conscious Recovery, the intention for Conscious Recovery is to share my perspective of what really helped me, not as a replacement for, but in addition to what anyone is doing. So if someone's doing therapy, or they're doing 12-step, or they're doing Dharma, or they're doing Smart Recovery, I want this just to be an additional opportunity for them to heal. And so first of all, I didn't really want to write a recovery book. And for some reason, I just resisted it for a good year. And then finally I said, okay, I'm going to write this book about recovery, and I know what I want to say. And so to answer your question, to start with the medical model, and I want to always say there's nothing inherently right or wrong about this. It's just a different approach. And so the medical model, the Western medical model, is what are your symptoms and how do we help you eradicate them? And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but are we actually getting to the root cause of why we have these symptoms? So I think that's the fundamental difference for the medical model, is rather than saying, let's get rid of the symptom of addiction or, a diagnosis that we might get, we're going to say, what's at the core of this? What's at the root of this? What is the root cause of this symptom? And can we heal it from that much deeper place? When it comes to 12-step, there's a lot that's really congruent. There are a couple of things that I think are slightly different. I mean, the core, the foundational principle of conscious recovery is underneath all addictive behavior is an essential self that is whole and perfect. Now, that's not necessarily counter to all of 12-step, but there is a group within 12-step that says, it's a disease. You have this disease for a lifetime. You have an allergy to alcohol. We hear that. You have a genetic predisposition. I've heard people tell horrific stories, and then say, but that's not why I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic because I have the disease of alcoholism. And I would sit there and say, you realize that you're talking about the trauma, and that is a part of why you chose, whether that's conscious or unconscious, to drink and use. Yes, there might be a genetic code or something that creates addiction in one person and not another, but I don't think there's one answer. And I think that's important to state. There isn't one answer. But what I have found very simply, and it really comes from my work with Mary Helen, it was much more the way she saw me than what she was saying to me. She saw something within me that was capable of healing when I couldn't access that for myself.
Yeah.
And so the idea to say to someone, you have a lifelong chronic illness that can never be healed but only treated one day at a time, how does that affect the person? In the beginning of recovery, for me personally in my journey, I remember lying on the floor at 7 days sober, sobbing, thinking, I'm not a bad person. I have a disease of alcoholism. That was relief. And in 1935, when Alcoholics Anonymous came up with that, that was groundbreaking because we were saying you're a moral degenerate before that, and you were locking people up. So yes, light years in the future to say it's a disease, but now we know more. And to me, addiction is a response to pain. It is what I call a brilliant strategy rather than a coping mechanism to manage unresolved trauma, spiritual disconnection, and toxic shame. And we find that brings relief, so we use more and more and more of it. And at some point, we cross some kind of line where it starts causing more problems than it does solutions.
So what do you say to someone who, like the person you shared, who shares their story, horrific traumas, and then ends with, but that's not why I drink. I have a disease. Because there are people that very much separate the two.
Yeah.
I've gone through all this in my life, but that's not why I drink.
Yeah.
And so how do you help somebody come together with that?
Well, I know you and I both love to talk about curiosity, and it's very popular now. Let's be curious together, but we're talking about truly being curious. So I would invite someone to say, might there be a connection? Yeah, it might be a disease. It might be you might have a genetic predisposition. I mean, we can go down that road because and maybe we put a pin in that, but even if it is a disease, it doesn't mean that we can't actually cure it or heal it. Now, that does not mean, for the record, everyone, I'm not saying that means people can go drink and use normally. I've chosen abstinence for almost 40 years now. That's been my path. I'm very grateful that I did. But the idea that we'll never heal a disease, even if it is a disease, I think is limited. What we know now about neuroplasticity with the brain, what we know now about we change our relationship with our DNA. So set that aside for a moment, even though I kind of didn't set it aside. Yeah. The idea of being curious about, might there be a connection to the trauma you experienced? Might that be, at least initially when you drank and used, was it relief from that? Did you drink and use more because you were maybe afraid to look at the trauma, the disconnection, and the shame you were experiencing? So if we're curious with someone, then they can start to look for themselves. Yeah.
And some people just choose not to be curious. Right. Some people don't want to open that door. Right. And I hear that too as a clinician working in treatment or even in private practice. It's, I don't want to look at that right now. Not seeing that there is a connection. And if we open this door, another door will open, and I'm going to invite you to walk through both doors, and sometimes people do and sometimes people don't. So how does conscious recovery work with someone? Like, take me through, how do you begin? How does that enter someone's space?
Well, I'm going to go back to the founding principle, because I think it's really popular in our field, for example, to say people aren't always ready to address their trauma. Well, of course that's true. Yeah. But I think that has become a blanket statement for everyone almost. Like, let's get people stable. We're going to stabilize them, and then we're going to get them the help they need after treatment, or we'll encourage them to work on their trauma when they're a year sober or 2 years sober. And that's a model. It's a model that's been happening for many years, and we see people coming back to treatment over and over and over again. I'm not saying every single person on day one of their recovery needs to dive in and re-experience their trauma. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is what about, I remember, because, I think examples are so much more powerful than concepts. So I remember going to a program once, and there was a young woman, 20 years old, and I knew her because she had been to treatment other places. And she said, I'm in treatment for the 10th time, but they won't let me talk about my rape. And I'm telling them, it's killing me. Now, that is honestly the exception, that a person wants to. Usually it's more like what you're saying, someone doesn't want to. So how do we encourage them? Well, the foundational principle of conscious recovery, underneath all this behavior, is a whole and perfect and complete being, is a very different starting point than you come to treatment, Sharon, and you're broken and damaged and have this lifelong disease, and you've got these 3 diagnoses that can never be healed. Now let's look at your trauma. Yeah. Right. There's nothing stable there. And so, of course, we would say, well, Sharon's not ready yet. So we're going to give her the one-size-fits-all approach to treatment and hope that she addresses her trauma down the road. That's working for about, 10 to 15% of the people.
Yeah.
But I want to move that number. And there's not, and I want to be clear, there's not a one-size-fits-all. Not everyone is actually ready to address their trauma, but I think our clients are way more resilient and strong than we give them credit for. And if we can start with this curiosity about remembering a time before they felt broken and damaged, and coming from that place, we can actually start to work on it. And another way I'll say it is, people have been running from that for years. That is, by its very nature, the definition of addiction. And so are we co-signing on that when they come to treatment? Oh, you don't have to worry about that yet. Oh, you're right, you're not ready yet. No, let's take this moment. You don't have to go back and re-experience the trauma, but to be able to understand how it's still alive within you. And maybe it's overly simplistic, but I really do think the number one recovery tool is giving someone the understanding experientially that they have the ability to sit with themselves, even if it's for 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's profound.
Yeah.
It's not a teaching. Right. It's an experience. Oh, I didn't run from it. I can actually feel what's present in my body.
Yeah. And it makes sense that addiction is the natural escape, the brilliant strategy, the thing that protected us, whatever, all the brilliant strategies that protected us from actively killing ourselves, but slowly killing ourselves.
That's right.
Yeah. There's this great quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it was addictions were created to manage the symptoms that I couldn't look at the time. It was something like that. It was what I needed at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually very grateful for drugs and alcohol. At age 7, I had a profound experience of closing my heart, and I remember the physical sensation of that experience. I can remember it to this day, sitting at the table and just feeling my heart closing. And I walked around that way for 7 years. And so at 14, roughly 14, when I had my first taste of alcohol or my first experience with weed, it literally saved my life. It literally was a brilliant strategy. And it's funny because I do get a little pushback on that brilliant strategy thing, but I'm not saying it's so brilliant, keep doing it, until you're 90 years old. That's not what we're saying. Yeah. But it started as something that brought relief. Yeah. It's not the problem, it was the solution.
Absolutely. And I, since having met you and having so many conversations with you, I often use brilliant strategies because at the time they were brilliant.
Right.
They were like the best. I tell clients now, it's like your best thinking led you here. Your best decisions led you here. So yes, the brilliant strategies at the time is, how most people come to a place where they realize they're not so brilliant and it's no longer serving and they do need to change.
Yeah, and what I love about starting with that as a concept is a lot of times, and I know you and I know this really well, working with clients, it's like there's this thing I'm doing, I'm calling it a coping mechanism, and I want to get rid of it.
Yeah.
I want to stop numbing out.
Yeah.
I want to stop escaping. I want to stop being so angry. And instead of that, we're going to say, well, let's go back and like when someone presents with anger, we send them to anger management.
Right.
Instead, we want to be saying, what's the anger management? What is it managing?
Right.
Right. And when did this start? And we know that it's usually something really early. So in my journey, things were tough at home. I would go in my room, I would close the door, I would escape into fantasy with my toys or whatever I did. And so when I was in early recovery and in my early 20s, something intense would happen and I would numb out. And I thought, I should stop doing this. I shouldn't numb out. This is not serving me. So I was at war with it. No one was there to say, what if it's a brilliant strategy that thinks it's keeping you safe?
Yeah.
It wasn't until I was in my 30s or 40s I started to hear that or, play with that as an idea. I love you, brilliant strategy. Thank you, anger. You have served me well. Now let's look at what's underneath it. And when we heal what's underneath it, we realize we don't need to use the anger and it's not really getting us what we want.
And I'm glad that you used the word numbing out because we see a lot of that, not just with drugs or alcohol. We see that with phones and social media and vaping and anything I can detach from. Right. Feeling is happening. I need to plug into something. Yeah.
Yeah. Plug and unplug from something.
Yeah.
Right. Really, it's like
I really need to unplug.
Yeah. And most people aren't conscious of that.
Yes.
Like I was certainly not conscious of that. I just thought it was too scary to be in my body. And that really, if you think about some of the traumas that we experience, especially if you think about sexual trauma, because I had very young, I had sexual trauma, 3 years old, and I spent 20 years, 25 years, 30 years thinking if I could just remember exactly what happened, it would be miraculously healed. Right. And that's where I think therapy, some types of therapy can fall short because it's not about figuring out what happened. It's like, it's alive in my body. And I remember like anything that felt hypersexual at all to me, if I was exposed to that as an adult, I would literally feel pressure on my shoulder. I would literally numb out. I would shut down. I would become tearful. My body was holding all of that, right? Yeah. We know Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, right? Yeah. Trauma doesn't show up as a memory. It shows up as a reaction. Yeah. And the reaction is in the body. And so that body is letting me know not something's wrong, but that something's wanting to heal and needing to heal.
Right. Yeah. Not a fun wake-up call when it shows up.
Not a fun wake-up call. Yeah. And at the same time, people will say, isn't it painful to heal the trauma? And the only thing more painful than healing the trauma is not healing the trauma. Right. Now, it only took me 20 years to figure that out. Yeah. And it wasn't that I figured it out. It was like, oh, I can actually lean in and do this healing. And it is much easier than running from it all of my life and choosing people who are unavailable and all of that just becomes this existential suffering.
Yeah. And the suffering that we push down and push down and push down. Right. And it's not that it's painful to talk about it or work with it because it is there. And it's just festering and festering. And like you said, if we wait, now we have older trauma on top of whatever we've accumulated until we come to deal with it.
Well, yeah, because if I like, a big part of conscious recovery is the idea of core false beliefs. Yes. And I just add the word false. I know a lot of people talk about core beliefs, but I like to acknowledge their lies, right? That we picked up early in life. Mm-hmm. I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. I'm not good enough. And that becomes the operating system of our life. And it really is a vibration. It's a frequency. And so if I don't heal that from the place of origin, and I don't mean go back and re-experience the trauma, but if I don't care for the 7-year-old when I made those major life decisions, I will keep replicating it over and over and over again and re-traumatizing myself. And the way I know I'm doing it is if I say something like, why does this keep happening to me? Mm-hmm. Right? There's the pattern. There's the recognition.
So you have a concept in your book called the essential self.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So we come into the world as an essential spiritual being. Now, not everyone believes that, so it may or may not be true. It's my experience. I would not look at an infant and say, look at this little broken human, right? I don't know how it would even be possible unless I was so deeply wounded that I saw that in an infant, right? Yeah. And I know there are traditions, there are religious institutions that actually teach that we come in broken or damaged or sinners and that we need to repent. So, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying that this has been my experience and that the Buddhists call it Buddha nature. Some people would call it consciousness. But there's a place within us that's unharmed and unharmable. And we came into the world knowing this, not intellectually, because our brains weren't even developed, but just being natural experience of that. If you look at a 2-year-old, a pre-programmed human, everything they do naturally is what we're looking for in recovery or therapy or a spiritual path. I want to learn how to feel my feelings. They know how to do that. And so we tell them it's not okay. I want to be able to be more present and loving. They'll just be right there with you until we teach them staring's not polite, which, is wild. Please don't connect. That's not okay. And so everything that we're looking for is actually innate, meaning that must be true for me too. That means there's still this essential self. And so recovery isn't about learning as much as it is about unlearning all the programs that we've received that are counter to this knowing that there's this essential self.
Yeah. That's a lot. It's very true.
Yeah.
So I had a question about, working as a professional in this professional industry, what is the biggest blind spot that you see in how addiction is currently being treated?
I think the biggest blind spot. Now, I'll give myself a moment to digest that question because I might come up with something else. But the first thing that came up was, I think we think that it's centered in the mind only. The way we learn, the way clinicians are trained, it's pretty cerebral, right? Mm-hmm. You and I have gone to a lot of conferences. As a matter of fact, that's why at Emergence, my conference Emergence that happens every year, that you're a keynote speaker at this year, we don't allow PowerPoints. And I say we don't allow it. We call it a PowerPoint-free zone.
Yeah.
Not because I only want to choose, put someone on the spot for an hour that doesn't have that crutch, but because if we're doing PowerPoints, it's conceptual instead of experiential. So I think the number one blind spot is I'm the expert and you're the broken one. I think that's the biggest blind spot. I come in thinking, I'm a clinician, whether that be a tech or a counselor or a therapist, whatever level you're at, a psychiatrist, PhD, it doesn't matter. If I believe I'm the person with the answers, I think that's a blind spot. I think being in the curiosity with someone and helping them discover their own answers is actually much easier and more effective. And then the other piece is going back to we go to these trainings and we learn these concepts, and then we go to treatment and try to teach our clients. We even call it psychoeducation.
Yes.
And I can guarantee you, because we're here at a treatment program, mm-hmm. I could go find a client right now that would just brilliantly facilitate a relapse prevention group.
Absolutely.
I mean, brilliantly.
Yeah.
They understand it all, and yet they're at treatment.
Right.
So there's a blind spot there for them, but there's a blind spot there for us too.
For sure.
Well, he needs to learn more. She needs to, know more. But really, it's let's help someone get in their body, actually experience something. I think that's how we really change.
Yeah. And I 100% agree. I know as a clinician, I sure knew a lot. And I came into this field to help people and to teach them. And I quickly learned that there is really no difference. We're all the same. I have some great book knowledge, and maybe my colleague has some good experiential knowledge, but really when we're in the room, we're all the same. It's some of us just got off the bus a little sooner than the other. Some of us, just got off at a different stop, and we're just a few decisions away from changing seats.
Yeah.
It's really, we're on even playing fields. There is no difference. The only difference between a client and myself is I wear a suit and I might have some book knowledge, but there's plenty of people in rooms that have book knowledge and have struggled.
Yeah.
And there is no hierarchy. I'm not any different than any client that I treat. I'm just a few decisions away.
Well, and if I'm committed to going back to Mary Helen's 7 principles, there's only one of us here.
Right.
Pema Chodron says compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It's a relationship between two equals.
Right.
And that being equal doesn't mean that we're in the same place in life, right? I'm, 39 years sober. I've been in the field for almost 20 years. I have this experience. I have something to share. But the truth is, we are yet in the midst of that. I'm not the expert, right? The expert lives within them. And, he simply said, and it's a profound idea. Are you ready? People don't change unless they want to.
Yeah.
And so how do I, as a clinician, whether I'm facilitating a group, saying hi to someone in the hallway, meeting with them one-on-one, how do I help hold a space so they can get in touch with what they truly want? And then we can build a life from that knowing. Because again, at the deepest level, we all want love and connection. We all want to be seen, right? Someone, for example, who has a borderline personality disorder diagnosis, they might present as pushing away, but we know the deepest longing is connection. Right. So let me help them connect with themselves so that they don't have to do that brilliant strategy of pushing people away.
Right. Yeah. Connection is a really profound one. And it's hard for and I'll speak about clinicians because I am one, but we are taught to connect differently. Very rigid boundaries. And it wasn't until I really started working in the field now 20 plus years that I'm like, wow, we need to update our literature because there's so much that we're missing by just staying in the box, that clinical box of boundaries, and not connecting with the other person as a human. And what would you say, like, what advice would you give therapists to incorporate more of these spiritual elements into their practice?
Yeah, I love the question. And I think it piggybacks perfectly on what you just said, because obviously professional boundaries are important.
Absolutely.
I am not a fan of self-disclosure. I think it rarely helps. Every now and then I might mention I'm in recovery, or I might mention that I had this experience, but it's very, very rare. Life is energy. 90% of communication is nonverbal. So I think if I think what I'm going to say is so important, it really is only 10%. The 90% is how I'm being. And so the way I talk about it, because I like to be provocative, I'll say, do we really need boundaries? Just so people will lean in. Yes, we need professional boundaries. Yes, it's true. I'm not going to overly self-disclose. This isn't about me. It's about my client. But the energetic boundary I want to bring down. So what do I mean by that? A boundary in the world is a wall, right? It's a wall, it's a border. When we teach people boundaries in our field, we tend to say, here's a line and you can't cross it. If we're going to use the word boundary at all, it's like, no, here's a line that I'm not going to cross because I know what happens when I do. But the energetic boundary, I hear things like this. I'm an empath. I pick up on people's energy, so I need to protect myself. And I invite any healer to look at that and flip it on its head and say, I'm an empath, so I want to take the energetic boundary down. Now, I don't mean I'm going to take on the stuff, my client's stuff. It's not my responsibility, but they feel when there's a wall there, but only 100% of the time. Okay. Our clients are very, very attuned and always looking for safety. So true safety gets created when the energetic boundary comes down, and then I'm curious with them, and it's something that is felt. It's not something that's understood intellectually. And I think that's really what conscious recovery is at its core. It's a philosophical framework about connection and attunement.
And the concept, the modality, the books, the literature, that could be implemented in any framework in conjunction with recovery and therapy, in sober livings and treatment, at home for personal use.
That's right. Yeah,
so it really complements everything.
Yeah, I mean, again, I really, the last thing I would ever want anyone to say is conscious recovery is the one and only way. I mean, please don't say that, people. There is no one path. There are multiple paths, right? Yeah. And we don't know what is going to resonate with the one person walking in the door. So conscious recovery is a book. It's a series of workbooks. It's curriculum. It's clinical trainings. There's journals. There's, videos. It's really designed to enhance what someone is doing and to add to. I just had the privilege of being in a treatment program the other day, and a young woman had her conscious recovery book with all the little tabs and the highlights, and she was so happy to meet me. And, if that's 1 out of 50 people, we've helped her, right? So we want to provide as many opportunities. Someone's going to resonate with conscious recovery differently than something else, and someone else will not resonate with conscious recovery. So it's just an additional tool.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan. I personally have this one.
Thank you.
And as I'm going through it, I'm hearing things, and I'm like, I see a little cognitive behavioral therapy model. Right. Oh, I see a little Buddhist. Oh, it was such a beautiful complement and compilation of everything, and yet so simple. And
Thank
so
you.
User-friendly and so inviting. And it just kind of like is I get the feeling of like grounding when I'm bringing it. And I'm not in recovery, but I love the work. And I don't feel like I chose this work. I feel like it chose me. And that's a different story on a different podcast. But I just thought it was so beautiful and so inviting. And then there's so much more that you do. You have a podcast, LMNQ, you have Emergence. Like, tell me more I don't know how do you sleep? It seems like your hands are in a lot of things that are evolving so nicely.
Yeah, thank you. I have another big thing about to be announced. I'm not at a point I can announce it yet, but I will say that my passion is providing spaces for people to heal. So I love people healing in a retreat setting. There's the little teaser. But yes, I'm one of the co-founders of LMFT Healing Center in San Diego. It's an LGBTQ specific PHP IOP owned by the team at Monema Behavioral Health. And so being able to partner with them, they're just this phenomenal team doing true trauma healing. Monema is a women's specific program, and I approached them and said, I'd love to see this happen for men and or for LGBTQ folks. And so they brought me in as a partner. So I do that. There's a podcast connected with that, LMFT podcast. I'll have you on that. That'll be a good one. We love allies on that for sure. So to have conversations about deeper healing. And then Emergence is the annual conference. This year is our 5th annual. Really different for behavioral health. There's no breakout sessions. It's one person on one stage, and everyone's in one room, including the sponsors. They're all around the outside of the room. It's a beautiful space, but the intention is for us to have a deeper conversation about how we can actually help our clients heal. This year, the theme is Healing is a Love Story, which is dedicated to our wonderful friend Gina Tabrizi, who passed away several months ago. Time flies, but she was such a spark of light in our industry. And to lean into that, that's the title of her book, Healing is a Love Story. So every conversation, every panel discussion, you are a keynote, is going to be centered around this conversation, and it's very engaging, and it's not your typical conference. So those are just a few of the things I do. And then I'm playing with the idea of writing my 4th book right now.
Wow.
Just started that.
Yeah. So what fills your cup? Because I see you speaking, hosting, consulting, podcasting, counseling. You're everywhere. What fills your cup, and how do you practice your own principles? Like, how do you refuel?
Well, so this is true for me. This is what fuels me, right? The speaking fuels me. The podcast interviews fuel me. The facilitating retreats fuels me. All of that is what truly is energizing. And I call it the energizing power of presence, right? Being present in and working with someone and observing them or being part of their healing is exhilarating for me. So it doesn't mean that I don't love to take, long cruises with my husband and rest. We have 2 of them coming up. We're going to do one a year. That's kind of our new thing. Like, I love that. I go to Mexico every year with my husband and my best friends. I love that downtime. But the truth is, what really does feed me is the work itself. So it doesn't feel like work at all for me.
So what's next for a conscious recovery?
My colleague, Dr. Patrick Lockwood, and I are about to start the Conscious Recovery Institute. Ooh. And we're going to be creating a learning platform for clinicians to really immersively, to be more immersed in conscious recovery. One of the pieces we see missing in our field is techs who come into the field. If it's in substance use, they often come in early sobriety and don't get a lot of training or attention. So we're going to create a bunch of trainings for them. So it's going to be a fully digital platform, and we kind of haven't announced it yet, but we have the website's up. It's just we're not quite ready to launch yet, but we're going to be having conversations like these for clinicians and provide digital training. So that's the newest iteration of conscious recovery.
And you have Conscious Recovery, the website. You have TJ Woodward, the website. You have so many phenomenal YouTubes with amazing, amazing guests. And we're going to list them all on the podcast so people can access them, because it's really a wealth of information and inspiration for me. And I know that our viewers and listeners will thoroughly enjoy it as well.
I'm thinking about starting another show that's very similar to what we're doing right now, bringing on experts in the field or healers of all types.
Yeah.
Under the umbrella of Heal the Healers. I'm working on that because it's really my greatest passion to be in unison with voices like yours and having these conversations. So that may be coming soon, but there are a lot already on my YouTube channel.
It's nice to see how much resilience and energy there is coming from you about this. It's definitely a passion. I see it and I hear it. And I did, it was a Facebook Live with you all about healing the healers. Yeah. And that was very exhilarating, because that is another passionate topic that I'm about is, we're talking about helping clients and helping clients and helping clients, but What about when we become clients?
That's right.
Because at some point, we are all clients of something, whether it's therapy, medical, dental, treatment. And I have a talk that I do about when healers get wounded. And it's a popular talk about when we're talking about other healers, but when we're talking about ourselves needing help, it's quite a tough one. And there's a lot of secrecy that goes on around it and a lot of anonymity, which is very respectful, but there needs to be more non-stigmatizing conversation about getting healing, not just for those clients, but for ourselves as people. If we're going to say there's one of us, then we need to start acting like there's one of us a little more.
Yeah,
spaces.
I think it is the shadow of our industry, and it shows up as, at any given moment, there might be a call for deeper healing for us. We might go through a divorce or a breakup or the loss of a partner or the loss of a job, and we might go through a relapse and keep it a secret. And I've seen it, this past year, we've lost several people in our field to suicide and overdose. And I don't want to keep that a secret. And it's interesting that there's even a part of me right now that there's a voice that's like, you shouldn't be saying that. And isn't that fascinating? Because it goes back to like, we're the experts and we're the heroes, we're the healed ones. No, we're all in this together. And it is why I'm going to do some Heal the Healer retreats coming up, and those will be announced soon. It's a place to drop in and do that healing, because what ends up happening, the shadow aspect, is like, I'm afraid to tell you that I need help because you might not want to send me a client, whether I'm a therapist in private practice or I own a treatment program or I'm in business development. I think a lot of times we do put on that happy face that everything's fine, and sometimes it just isn't. I mean, I have family members who are not doing well from a mental health standpoint. I've helped them get in treatment in the last year, and people in the field have been really incredible. And what if that person needs to be me at some point? I want that same ability to not say, oh, I'm okay. Like a very close friend of mine really needed some mental health care, and he was afraid to tell people or to tell, he's like, I know the greatest therapist and the greatest programs, but I'm afraid that I can't show up at that program. How will that look? And I think there's something to that. And at the same time, we know that shame lives in secrecy, silence, and judgment. And there is judgment in the field about that, which I find fascinating. That we would ever judge someone working in the field if they have an issue with an addiction or a mental health concern. I mean, that's
like we're immune.
Like we're immune.
Yeah.
And I will say that I've been quote unquote guilty of that, because it is shocking when we lose someone in the field, because I forget that we're all human, we're all spiritual beings, we all need help at any given moment. We don't know what's next for us.
Yeah. So now we got to end it on a positive note.
Let's do it. I mean, I think the positive note that I will say about, I'm going to speak a couple of things. One is the field itself. When I came in the field in 2008, we would not be sitting down having this conversation. I don't think it was welcomed yet. I was doing conscious recovery sort of in the closet, and I've never been in the closet, clearly, but I think the idea of saying, what about a person's inherent value and inherent wholeness? I think the concept of I'm not the expert here, but I'm here to hold space for you to discover that. These were conversations that were marginalized 10 or 15 years ago, and now they're becoming mainstream. So I have a lot of hope for our field. I think, whether that be there's only one way to get sober, that old guard is still around, but it's also changing dramatically. Yeah. I remember even equine therapy was called woo-woo 10 years ago. Now, everyone, if you don't have equine therapy on your website, you're not doing treatment, right? So we're evolving in a very beautiful way, and we are now not only honoring holistic approaches, but really realizing that we can help people actually heal instead of just treat. So
Absolutely.
There's hope there.
Oh my gosh, there's so much hope. So I remember being in the field in 97.
Wow.
And thinking, horses, woo-woo. That was me. I didn't even know the word woo-woo yet. I just was I just scoffed. Like there was only one way. It was the therapeutic community, and it was consequences and
behavior modification.
Super shaming things.
Yes.
And the transformation and the shift of it is just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I remember sometimes thinking like, is this, could there be a better way? And then going, of course not. And had I leaned into the curiosity, I mean, I was so young, like, was I allowed to lean in curiosity?
Probably
No.
not.
I had a supervisor and
Right.
You just did what you were told. But there was always those peaks of, I wonder if, and I shut it down until it was like becoming more mainstream, as you said. Like mental health and drug treatment has evolved so much in the last 20 plus years. And it's so nice that conscious recovery has stepped up and been a leader in that as well.
Thank you.
Because it just gives so much voice. And so what would your message be to a newcomer who can't even comprehend some of the 7 principles that we've talked about?
Yeah.
Like, I am whole and perfect. What? I'm not broken. What? Like, I could say that all day long, but no. Like, what? How would you crack in there, get in there, invite them, embrace them? What would you say to someone listening saying, this is woo-woo. This is some bullshit?
Yeah. I would say to someone, regardless of what you've done and regardless of what has happened in your life, you are worthy of a life filled with love and connection, and that you came into the world as a whole and perfect being. And even if you can't feel that at this moment, I want you to be curious about what it would be like and what it would feel like for you to return, even for a moment, to that knowing that, like, shame does not heal shame, and that you are deserving of a beautiful life, and that addiction is not the problem. It's a solution that you have been using, a brilliant solution, and now it's time to ask the question, what do you really want? Because you deserve to have the life you really want.
Wow, that is profound and beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, I feel so full. See, this is what I'm saying. Like, I feel so energized right now. Like, why would I need to rest from this? This is really what feeds me. So thank you for that. And thank you for the amazing work you do. I'm so excited for Emergence and to hear you speak. So, thank you for doing this podcast.
Thank you. I'm just a curious therapist.
Just a curious therapist.
Just a curious therapist.
Just a curious therapist.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Beyond the Window. To dive deeper into TJ Woodward's transformative approach to recovery, visit consciousrecovery.com or explore his work at tjwoodward.com. If this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Until next time, keep looking beyond the window.